Bet horse racing on DRFTV. We'll match your first deposit of $200. Get free expert picks and past performances, plus weekly cash back. All from Daily Racing Form, the most trusted name in horse racing.
Hey everyone, David Aragona and Craig Milkowski here, taking a look at the graded stakes that kicks off the stakes action on Pegasus World Cup Saturday at Gulfstream Park. It is race 6, the grade 3 Prevoyante Stakes, going 1.5 miles on the turf course for fillies and mares. Craig, we've got a field of 8 signed on for this one. Does feel like there's a little bit of filler in this race. I think there are some big prices that are pretty tough to make a case for, and not the greatest depth that we've seen in a race in this division, but there are a couple of runners in here that do have quality.
Yeah, I do think it's a pretty solid race. One of the horses is actually entered to run. We're recording this early. It's entered to run on Thursday. So by the time the race is run, we'll know whether that horse is going to go or not. But I still think it's a pretty competitive and evenly matched field among the contenders.
Let's throw up the field of 8 runners for this Prevoyante. And I have not seen the morning line yet, but I would imagine that the number 5 Adventuring would be installed as the morning line favorite. She's just the most accomplished runner coming in here. She's a stakes winner, actually a multiple stakes winner. One of many that's trying this 1.5 mile distance for the first time, though. And Craig, I think distance is going to be one of the main talking points in this race because a lot of these runners haven't quite gone this far yet in their careers.
Yeah, it's one that's a bit interesting from a pace perspective. I'm sure we're going to take a look at the pace perspective in a minute, but I think the distance is probably the biggest factor in the race.
Let's take a look at that Timeform US pace projector before we get to the main contenders. And you can see one of those big prices, the number 3 Beau Draw, is shown on the lead. And we're not going to talk about these long shots as individual contenders, but they could have a presence as far as the pace goes, particularly that number 3 Beau Draw. She's coming out of some shorter races, even some dirt sprint races. Turf is a big question mark for her, especially going this far, but I guess it wouldn't be a big surprise if she's leading this field for the first mile or so.
Right, and she's a little different. Sometimes we get these horses that are dirt horses, and we don't really know how they're going to transfer their form. But she's a horse who's actually run on the turf a few times. She's actually shown speed when she's done it, actually just once. But she was up pretty close in a much shorter race, in a race with a fast pace. So I wouldn't be surprised if she is up there, and that could spell some trouble for the likely morning line favorite Adventuring.
Speaking of adventuring, let's take a look at her positioning in the Timeform US Finish Projector, something we've been talking about in our recent stakes previews. The Finish Projector, a new feature in the Timeform US version that we're launching in DRF Mobile PPs. You can check it out by just going to your normal DRF Mobile PPs and tapping on that Timeform US tab. And Craig, not a big surprise to see that the algorithm is picking Adventuring to win this race. She's just coming in with the best class lines and, most importantly, the highest speed figures of anybody in this field.
Right. She has the highest speed figures, but it's not a huge gap. As we can see, the 4 and the 2 are not very far behind. And one thing that, at least for now, the algorithm doesn't differentiate is the distance of the races. So that, as I said, it is a big factor in here, and one that I'm sure we're going to dive into pretty deeply as we move through the entrance.
And let's go through some of these contenders. We'll get to Adventuring in a little bit, but let's begin by taking a look at a replay from Belmont at the Big A back in September in a race that featured Transient and Lysine. And this was a race that was going the 1 mile and 3/8 distance. So they've definitely, well, they haven't gone 1.5 miles yet. At least we know they can handle one of these 3-turn marathons. And Transient is the one who does win this race. And Craig, she's just a horse that's been in pretty solid form recently. Feels like she's taken a step forward since switching into the Saffie Joseph barn this year. And it does feel like she's supposed to get this distance, even though she hasn't quite gone this far yet.
Yeah, it does feel like the distance shouldn't be a problem. For me, what will be a little bit of a problem is those speed figures. When we saw the opening page showing the field, you can see it had this race has a race rating of a 114, a figure that she's yet to reach. Now, she is a 5-year-old mare, pretty young 5-year-old. obviously, and they tend to still be improving at that point, particularly turf runners. So maybe she has a forward move in her. She has some conflicting running lines there that we see, but I'm going to more ignore that last one on the synthetic. Not sure what she was doing up on the lead. She's never really shown that kind of early speed before, and she kind of packed it in late. So I'd be surprised if they didn't revert to a more closing style that we see in all our other past performances.
Yeah, I'll be interested to see how they do ride her in this race. There are a number of contenders that could be on the lead and have shown forwardly placed running lines in the past. I guess it's going to be a bit of a jockey's game to see who decides to go to the front. And Transient didn't seem like Jose Ortiz wanted to have her on the lead last time of that Maple Leaf, but she kind of dragged him up there, got a little bit too headstrong in the early stages. And I think she paid the price for that late. So she's going to have to settle better if she's going to get the 1.5 mile distance on Saturday. Also take a look at Lai Sheen's past performances. She also was in that replay we took a look at from Aqueduct, finishing 4th that day. And Craig, she's not out of the conversation to get a piece of this, but she really would have to improve on her turf speed because if she was going to upset this field.
Yeah, she's had some nice setups we see for a horse that doesn't have a lot of early speed. She's had a lot of fast paces to close into. She seems to get up for minor shares while not really getting the job done. Her Timeform US speed figures are once again, particularly on turf, several lengths below that 114 race rating. So she would be more of a trifecta, superfecta type horse for me.
Drawn just to her outside is the number 2 Personal Best, and we'll take a look at her last race when she was actually competing on the Tapeta surface at Gulfstream Park. This was in the Tropical Park Oaks. She was sent off as the 8-5 favorite this day and struck the lead at the top of the stretch, but couldn't quite hold off the late charges of a couple of rivals to her outside, including Candy Light, who has really been improving as of late for trainer Graham Motion. And while Personal Best did tire at the end of this race, Craig, I wonder if she's a horse that didn't really have the turn of foot to finish off that race over a shorter distance. It does feel like while she hasn't gone 1.5 miles just yet, the 2 races that she's gone that have been the farthest distances, 1 mile and 5/16 and 1 mile and 3/8, have been her best so far. So maybe the added distance is really going to work for her.
Yeah, I would agree. And that really stands out to me. You can see from her turf speed figure, she was definitely on an improving pattern. And I don't think it's a coincidence that was happening as the distances got longer. She's also just a 4-year-old filly, so even younger than what we've seen already. So definitely one that has room for improvement and has run some better speed figures. So I think she's got a real shot in this field.
Yeah, she's a really well-bred horse, being by Tappet out of that Grade 1 winning Damn War Flag. She's bred to run all day, so it feels like this is what she's always been meant to do, and she's finally getting into this kind of race, going a marathon distance in a graded stakes event. Drawn to her outside, 2 spots over, is the number 4 Beside Herself, and we'll take a look at her past performances in Timeform US. And Craig, this is a horse that was in good form over the summer at Saratoga, is one of the few runners in this field that actually has a victory going the 1.5 mile distance when she beat a pretty good horse in Rocky Sky back in August. But she just has kind of gone off form since then. Her last couple of races leave a lot to be desired.
They do. One thing that's been consistent with her, though, is her early speed. Now, you might wonder why she's not shown right up on the front end when you see all those 1s and 2s and red fractions. And it's mainly because she's just been running these longer distances. You can see 3 of the 5 are at 1.5 miles, 1 at 1 mile and 3/8. It's one of the distances where the algorithm struggles a little bit because it becomes more of a jockey's race. So she's a filly. I would not be surprised if she's up challenging for the lead, but you do have to wonder about her current form.
Yeah, you see a lot of those fast paces that have done her in the past, though. I think she has gotten some good trips in a few of those races, particularly that Jockey Club Oaks 3-back when she did earn her career best 117 Timeform US speed figure. But just visually, I didn't like that effort because she was on the best part of the racetrack riding the rail, and she really packed it in late. So I have some questions about how she's doing coming into this race. The likely favorite is the number 5 Adventuring, and we'll take a look at her last victory when she won the Ladies Marathon at Kentucky Downs last September. And you could see she looked like a winner from a long way out this day. It was Joel Rosario rode her with a lot of confidence. You can see at this point, even in mid-stretch, he hasn't asked her for her best yet. And once he finally sets her down, she's able to hold the runner-up Family Way at bay. And Family Way is a pretty good horse in her own right. She'd definitely be one of the favorites if she were in this race. And it just feels like Adventuring might have a bit of a class edge over this field as she drops out of some tougher spots.
I do think she has a little class edge, but I do have some concerns. We've mentioned the pace a few times. Her best efforts have come when she's right on or near the lead. Both of her turf wins, I believe, have come on the lead. And even more interesting is both of her turf wins have come at Kentucky Downs, a track which is just vastly different from what we're going to see at Gulfstream Park, obviously. So I do worry a bit that maybe she's a horse for course more than a class edge, as most of her successes come there. All of her other wins have come on different surfaces, both dirt and synthetic. So I do have some concerns, and if it just depends how short of a price she's going to be, if I'd have interest in her. But my lean is to go against.
Yeah, she's a horse that I don't think needs the lead to be successful, even though she won that last race on the front end. And while she hasn't gone this far yet, she's definitely bred to do so. So we'll see if she handles this 1.5 mile distance. But she definitely has running lines that do make her a deserving favorite in this race. And we'll wrap things up with the horse drawn all the way on the outside, the number 8, My Candy Girl, the horse that Craig mentioned, I think was entered in a different spot earlier this week. So we'll see if she ends up running here. And while she does have some solid turf form, she's a 6-time turf winner. She's never gone beyond a 1.16 miles.
Yeah, and generally, I'm not a big fan of these types making this big of a stretch out, particularly when they're pretty deep closers like she is. She's a horse that has very little speed. They tend not to have that same kick when they go 1.5 miles. So I would need very juicy odds to be interested in My Candy Girl.
Well, let's take a look at our top picks in this La Prevoyante. And Craig, I think that you're a little bit more adventuring than I am. For me, it was kind of a toss-up between adventuring and personal best. And I put personal best on top because I think she could be the better price, although she is a horse that's been pretty popular at the window as in her prior start. So I'd want to let price be my guide here. If they're the same price, I would want to lean towards adventuring, but I am anticipating personal best will be a slightly better odds.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing, just looking for a little more value. As I mentioned in the very beginning, I think this race is pretty evenly matched among the top contenders. So I went with the one that I thought would offer a little more value, but tough race and one that I would definitely not want to have to play in a like pick 5 sequence. So I'm glad it's not part of that.
Well, both Craig and I have personal best on top in the La Prevoyante Stakes on Saturday at Gulfstream Park. Good luck if you're playing the races this weekend.